Greetings, everybody! It is I, Countess Van Dracovin, here at the Dracovin Empire to talk to you about more ancestries in Golarion, the Pathfinder role-playing games world. We're going to be diving into yet another one, the Xulgaths. Yep, we're going to be learning about an interesting ancestry that's probably going to be more of an enemy, maybe. But get yourselves ready, grab your great swords, prepare your spell books, grab a few extra daggers. We're diving into Golarion once more. Yes, back into Golarion we go again to learn all about these creatures that are sometimes known by the surface dwellers as troglodytes. Yes, the Xulgaths. Now, if I was to learn about the Xulgaths, where could I look into? Where could I study them more? Well, these are some good sources that I wanted to point out here for you. Of course, most of these are fairly simple. Into the Darklands deals with them because they're in the Darklands. The Bestiary, which could go from the original Bestiary to the Monster Core, which talks about them now. Inner-Sea World Guides for a little bit of thing. And the Extinction Cursed Adventure Legacy of the Lost Gods is important in this case because there's information that is revealed in there. It is in other places when it comes to Xulgath. So keep all that in mind. So check these books out if you want to know. But who are the Xulgaths? Well, from the surface dwellers, who oftentimes refer to them by that more vulgar term of troglodytes. It's in the Monster Core now. I've seen the entry for it, so it's even something nowadays in the update. They're very barbaric, they're vicious, and they are humanoids that live in the Darklands. And this is more of a first image. I'll kind of be going through the first edition, original Pathfinder 2nd edition, and then Monster Core images for how they look. Their looks have evolved. When you find them, they're mostly in the layer of the Darklands, Narvoth. And they are very populous in that area, but they also are oftentimes abused by the stronger races, as you would call them. They have numbers, they don't have a lot else going for them. So they can find themselves on the low end for not only aren't they great people to be around with anyway, they aren't treated well either. So it's a double-edged sword there. They're reptilian. They have very dull gray scales and hinds, skinny bodies. Their molten kind of gray skin does help them to blend in with stone and rocks in the subterranean worlds. They kind of have that reptilian head with short, bony ridges down their spines. They're around 5 feet tall, though they do oftentimes kind of hunch over a little bit, which can make them appear shorter, weigh around 150 pounds. Depending on what region you do find them in, there is some variation too, because they're in large areas of Narvoth, and Narvoth spreads through entire sections of Golarion. You will find in some areas that they will have slight differences in their appearance, naturally, just from being in some of these areas. Generally speaking, it's just slight changes in the scale color and complexion and stuff like that. But otherwise, they're relatively standard in their appearance. Now, here's a original 2nd edition image. Now, they have been exposed to the radiation down there, and especially in their original home in the Darklands, the Black Desert, which has changed them dramatically. Basically, exposure to what's down in the Darklands has mutated their physiology to what it is now. These mutations do find themselves into granting some other characteristics and some other subspecies. I will also note some of these subspecies, we don't know how many have survived the Monster Core. Theoretically, they're all there in the Monster Core, but, you know, it's one of those things with the changes between 1st and 2nd edition, or the remaster project, the original 2nd edition Pathfinder. Some things might have disappeared, but again, I'm just going to go about that they are all there because we haven't heard different. So, again, mutations because of this, and a lot of times these mutations, though, help them in their role in a group. And a lot of times mutations will group together to work together because they have similar abilities. There are some Xulgaths that actually retain the ancestors' latent powers. They're latent, occult, psionic powers, and they're called Thought Malls. Those exist also in the Monster Core. They're mentioned that they do exist, so They don't call them by that name, but there are some that do have connections to these ancient powers. They're the only ones that actually have a remembrance of their original species name and things like that. So the Thought-Mauls, these types of Xulgath, remember the old days. Others just have forgotten. They do cook meat, but they chart over for a long duration. So things that are a lot more cooked and charred are edible to them, which would be inedible to other people. And this is probably due to their unique physiology, that they can digest as scorched meat, and anything that's very much more charcoalish. They require that almost. Now, they are one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. Now, you'd say, but they're known for being savages and monsters in a lot of ways, and not really being kind to other species. And in fact, when you meet them now, they're very tribal and relatively primitive. But this is one of those things about them. They're old. And primitive by standards now in Golarion. But at the time that they were at their height, they were more advanced than any of their contemporaries. Basically, they originated from the Ovarian Vault of Vask. It was a primeval jungle protected by the Darklands, ambient radiation by 6 glowing orbs known as caverns. They constructed vast cities of ziggurats, twisted aqueducts, fungus farms, animal ranches. They spread their orderly and bloody society across Vask. Eventually, they outgrew their birthplace and began building an empire across the Darkland during the Age of Legends. They came into conflict with many of the other Darkland species, especially during this time, all through serpent folk, elder things, many others. Now, they didn't have primitive technology in comparison to all these, but they had numbers, and they had their occult magic, their psionic magic. And any other humanoids that were in this region, they were far ahead of. They would often keep them as thralls. This was the height of their empire. And if you go by the Monster Core, it doesn't really tell why their civilization fell. Whether it was a fight against the serpent folks, because they were worshipping dark beings and things like that, and connecting things to give them their powers, like demons, which they do definitely worship now, that's maybe helped their decline. But from that good old book I mentioned, the last one I mentioned, the Legacy of a Lost God, we know outside of there one of the major things that happened to them. Eredin happened. The human god, the big one, the one that the time scale is based on, AR in Pathfinder. Yeah. In one AR, he came down to Vask. He basically believed that those cavern hearts, as they were called, which he named Aeon Orbs, were much better in human hands. Much better than the Xulgath can use. So he took 5 out of 6 of them with worthless. He's like, yeah, I'll leave you 1. But the other one couldn't really sustain the ecosystem. Remember I mentioned it was the radiation of the Black Desert. Well, Vask became the Black Desert, filled with dark sands and toxic radiation. It was a grand place with 6 tiny suns, and Eredin doomed it. Because he was unaware the last orb was unable to maintain that. He thought, 1 orb's enough. So the place was irradiated. It turned into a wasteland. And the people there, the Xulgaths, changed. Each generation became less intelligent, less patient. They lost their ability for farming, animal husbandry. The communities broke apart. Went to blows because of paranoia, scarcity. Mutations became common. And they became to have their core ability as a species that you may know about now, which is the stench they put off. Foul stench of Xulgath. They used to put out psychogenic oils on their skins. They found. And it blighted crops and livestock. So even if they're losing their abilities, it went even farther. So they descended into barbarism, cannibalism, and the great empire of the Xulgath crumbled. They forgot about their homeland, forgot about their identity, and certainly the majority of them forgot about who doomed Eric, the scaleless wizard who came down from the world above and took everything from them. Not all of them forgot. Most of them. So, you can see why probably those that remember are a little vengeful against the surface world and perhaps Eridan's favorite people, humans. But that's, just saying. So now, if you would find one of them in their groups, they're in small, desolate tunnels of Narva. Each has a small clutch. This clutch and their families can vary from a dozen to several hundreds. These clutches band together, sometime in long-term cooperation. But because of the power dynamic between their various societies, you're oftentimes not going to have these groups in together very long. But they also have a high birth rate. So they have a lot of numbers down there. Some of them actually have found their way to the surface too. We'll talk about it more. But in swamps or caves, where they can try to throw themselves out to the surface, gain some territory, they're not very successful, but they attempt, and there are some that are finding their way up there. Let's talk their society. And this is a Monster Core version of them. I do like the new art style a little bit much more than the other ones. I think it's a little more savage. Still reptilian, but interestingly savage. I do like this style. Strength is important to their society. But strength is interpreted many ways, and the strength comes to dominance here. Strength could be physical. It could be magical. Or it could be scheming. So, it comes in many forms. Most clutches, most groups, will have one of these to determine their leader. And you can have conflict in the group to see which one is the exact one. And basically, if conflict comes into place, like if a great magic user came into an area where physical might was best, if the two of them competed to the leader, they could change the definition of what strength was for that group. It would kind of like, it would now, oh, we've now seen that magic is more powerful, so magic is our new thing. It was physical strength, but magic has proven itself greater and more powerful. Now there's a new power dynamic. Oh, magic has been yet replaced by scheming. Scheming has been replaced by physical might. Now we're back to scheming again. It just depends on an aspiring leader who can beat their predecessor in combat, destabilize their reign, or use whatever means to seize power and then prove that they're the best, whether it is in the same organization, magic versus magic, or something replacing. Low-ranking members of the clutch, they just keep about their own concerns. They don't really pay attention to the power play. If you are just an average member of the clutch, you just do your life, and they're just like up there doing their thing. Strength, though, enables the other part of them thing, dominance, which is your personal worth. Your pinnacle of dominance in their society would be killing an enemy, burning their corpse, and eating the charred remains, because you're utterly destroying their essence and gaining the strength of what remains. That is the kind of idea of them thing. So it's sort of like, it is more ritualistic that I consume your strength to burn and eat the corpse of your enemy. Now, despite this nature, they are organized very similar to each other. Each clutch has a leader called a devourer, and takes secondary leaders called hardscales. Many devourers are deep mouths, which are divine spellcasters. And those that tend to keep their power through backstabbing or physical strength. Yes, you can still do that. Again, magical talent comes in many forms, but divine spellcasters have a one-up in a lot of ways. Doesn't mean you still can't use some physical strength or backstabbing to replace them. It's just, again, depends on your clutch, too. They raid other groups, other clutches and tribes. They raid the surface, who they hate. Again, I don't remember that this man, screwed us over But for whatever reason, me and my kinfolk just hate everybody that comes from up there. Also, they will raid other races within Narvath. Sometimes even attack down in lower levels, like Skemina. Despite these numbers, they tend to be a minor threat. They're incapable of mounting any kind of coordinated or organized attack. They're just as happy killing each other or looting each other. It doesn't mean that you couldn't get a very powerful or intelligent Xulgath warlord who could unite a number of these clutches together into a much larger group. That could be a pretty big threat. But these groups don't last very long. And they usually collapse from one major thing: infighting. Most, but not all, Xulgaths use this situation as an opportunity for powerful leaders to emerge. Others are inspired by the stone structures built by their ancestors of long-gone empire and seek to reestablish dominance. Though again, there certainly are members of their peoples that see them as taboo. Others, venerate them. It's again that entire thing of living up to the old ways or not. Even ambitious or well-organized clutches might look for things to put them on a one-up. Rare materials, water, maybe finding out about specific enemies by spying on them, planning larger raids by working together to a small degree. Larger clubs deep in the Darklands are led by thought malls. They're usually held in awe from their kind because they are a kind of throwback to the ancient Xulgath ways. And deep mouths, in this case, tend to be a layman or serve as advisor to these very powerful, ancient psionic Xulgaths. The ones that show up in these clutches aren't the only ones. I'm just going to say that. We'll talk about it. One of their main fuel sources are flammable funguses. Refuse also is used, and inedible dead. Smoke is a hazard, so they understand ventilation, how to keep fires under control. If one is to survive a smoke-filled chamber and maintain a fire that's getting out of control, it could be seen as a rite of passage. You demonstrate fortitude and ability to overcome flame. So fire-wielding spellcasters are seen very high, and coal is important in their rights to serve as important supplies for art and magic. They believe sigils inscribed in enemies' remains are especially potent reagents, and will make percussion instruments out of them sometimes. They can use stone shape with inflection, which is a technique that has survived since the fall of their empire. When deep mouths call on divine magic, thought malls employ occult magic, and others resort to alchemy, but all of them will look to inflect it. Inflecting stone is making it harder than before, but they can also inject other materials into it, or even others into other Xulgaths. In a process called stone binding, binding stone into them. So controlling fires, and stone is dominance over the environment. The pinnacle of this is obsidian, which is viewed as tamed fire. It's rare and brittle, and is used by their leaders oftentimes as special tools and ornaments. Inflicting it is actually very hard to do, and takes a long time, and creates something called Brightbone, which is as strong as Dawnsilver. Not to say you can also inflect it into an individual, but that's an entirely different issue too. They do tame creatures still, usually other reptiles, that are around them long enough to be immune to their stench. Deeper clutches will often have a lot of space and resources that they could have large groups of trained mounts. They have affinity with dinosaurs. They kind of come from an area that used to all exist in, and can employ them as beast of burden, siege engineers, or terrifying mounts. And some clutches even have fiendish dinosaurs called Gluttonbone. Then we have the demon side of them, which we'll talk about religiously, but just in general, demons can be seen with devout clutches. Summoned for purpose, staying as advisors, or basically they're just hanging around because these groups are doing a lot of bloodlust and we want to be involved in. Sometimes even half-fiends called Slargrax can be born amongst this entire thing. Sometimes even though they are hired as mercenaries by other beings, ones that are especially desperate or violent. They can even attract the attention of outcasts who worship demons. But then the power balance is still not quite there. And they will even occasionally ally themselves with surface dwellers. Despite their nature and hatred for them, they'll guide you through tunnels, allow them safe passage, because if you give them something like a magic item that would help advance their own ends, well, you've proven yourself at least worthy of that small bit of assistance or passage. You have made a trade that is worth it. So they are violent, they'll hate you as a surface dweller, but it doesn't mean that you can't make a deal. Now there is one final group we can mention as part of this, because in the Avorian Vault of Xulgath, there is still a community of thought-artists who are remnants of their empire. A small group that exists as the old Xulgaths. They kill their degenerate cousins on sight. They see them as a mockery of their own species. Not many of them. But if you would ever travel deep into the Avorian vaults, you might find something interesting. Very interesting. Let's talk their religion. The demon lord, I'm going to butcher this name, Zev Gavizeb. I think I got it pretty right. That's a hard one to pronounce. Basically, most Xulgaths worship that. His hunger, destructive nature resonate with them very well, who kill, eat, and spread his name. If they do not, he will devour their bodies and souls. His belief came from the infrequent outbreak of violence and cannibalism among their people, which attributed to him stirring in his realm of Gluttondark. The more violent the clutch is, the more devout they tend to be. He demands at least one meal of warm-blooded flesh daily. To devote clutches will usually keep a pen of such prey at hand. Another tradition involves dancing and screaming around a slowly impaled sacrificial victim. For this purpose, they build the largest cooking fires alongside concentric rings of butchery tables and around a large sharpened stalagmite. Those that do not worship Zeb Gavizeb usually turn to other demon or clip-off lords like Oar Oang and Shigareb. They're often seen as heretics that only deserve direct destruction from the rest of their kind. Druids of Xulgath generally break off and form their own small bands that are feared by the general populace. They excel at control of beasts of the Darklands. A few actually do eschew abyssal powers entirely in favor of their own innate strength or occult power, and some even turn to the green faith, rejecting their violent kin. They are less hostile towards surface dwellers. Doesn't mean they might not like you, but they probably won't attack you on sight. And they are painted as traitors by other Xulgaths. And the language they speak is Draconic, which is one of the most ancient in Golarion. Speaking of Golarion and the Xulgath people, a nice picture here from the Monster Core. They can be found in the caves and tunnels beneath the entire Inner Sea region, from the frozen isle of Antler Rock in the lands of the Inner Kings, the caverns of Earth Now in the realm of the Mammoth Lords, the Candlestone Caverns in Andoran, to the lost city of Savanth Yi in the Mongi Expanse, and the live-soaked caverns beneath the oasis of the Merza Desert, where they come into conflict with the Al-Zabriri tribes. They can even sometimes be found in the sewers of large cities, such as the sewers of Vir, and the deep market of Goka. In western Midal, Hanging Gloom celebrates when darkness ascended and wiped out thousands of them, and split sails are common in regional iconography. In the Uslavic countryside, some of them make their home in dark forests or abandoned fortifications. In Marshworth Clutch, in Orando, in Zura, they're inspired to conquer vampiric practices, and their deep mouths are capable of inflecting blood. In TNZ, tribes of fiendish Xulgaths can be found beneath the Kelsang Mountains in the depths of the labyrinth of the Two Hells. So they are all over the globe, technically, because Darklands spread everywhere. There are tunnels and stuff that go all over the place. Now, there are a number of variants, and I think I'm going to go over the basics of the variants, but keep in mind that whether or not these are in the new Monster Core or not is up for debate sometimes, but plenty of these have been in 2nd edition in general, with Xulgath just having a basic overhaul update in core, assume that you could probably use most of these anyway. Bile bearers are ones that have basically a putrid ability to have their like a bulging throat filled with a putrid bile, which can supply weapon and poison. They can also kind of spread as a mist around, but they can kind of throw out. They are kidnappers, assassins. Ragers are a little bit more developed, that are similar to them. They're a little stocky, but they also have stomachs, multiple ones that produce gastric acid, so they can not only spit out the poison, but they can coalesce a kind of acidic gas. Blood leakers are, in fact, a bad thing to be. You are born scaleless, with usually an upward high, and most are killed at birth, though some are kept as special blood donors for rituals. Goreguts are ravenously hungry, that eat a lot of the clutch's food, but they can also be living garbage disposals. Slaugrak are ones that I had mentioned before. They are the ones that are fiendish mutants with a taint of outer rifts on their blood. I don't know if they're statted out, but they are mentioned that they can be kind of connected with it because of outer rifts. So they could probably still exist in the current version of it. They don't get them. Spine snappers are particularly larger and stronger. They're shock troopers, champions. They might have different names depending on the clutch, but they're not naturally current. It could be because of botched stone bindings. They give them extra strength. Demonic rituals. Demonic rituals can also lead to more mutations, though. Stone lieges are artificially infused with the essence of elemental earth through the various regions. Hey, remember when I mentioned their ability to inflect stone can be used on a Xulgath? Basically, when it's successful, you get a stone liege who have control over earth then. They're hardy, long-lived, resilient, and can magically shape and control earth and stone. The Thought Maul, as I mentioned, who use that ancient occult power of ancient Xulgaths. And Twin Skulls are conjoined twins. Those that live to adulthood often become leaders and important members of because Xulgath leads are blessed by their demonic lord, but they could also be branded as marked by other patrons of enemies. And it depends on the superstitions of the clutch, whether or not they are seen as great warriors and leaders blessed by their demonic overlord, or not. But that's the Xulgath. An interesting species because, honestly speaking, it doesn't talk about them in the Monster Core, but I'm going to go on by the fact that it's in 2nd edition that Eredin is really the downfall of them. It's one of those things that they don't usually mention all the details on a species anyway. But, yeah, Eredin, and in a way, humans, screwed them over. Their great empire fell, their species degenerated into what it is now. It's kind of a tragedy brought upon by the carelessness of one man / god, and the state they are now is a result of it. Now, this state isn't necessarily the worst in a lot of ways. Certainly speaking, their civilizations crashed, they've fallen apart, but they still have numbers down there. They still are a powerful source, even if they're not truly a threat. They have a lot of their beings there. And it's an interesting case that if you see numbers as a sign of success, certainly you can see that oftentimes with humans, even those that are a little bit more savage or primitive in comparison to the average technology level of current Golarion, yeah, successful. So, in a way, they still are. She's not the same. Maybe not as well. Are they to be pitied? I don't know. They weren't really necessarily a great people to be around in their heyday. But I don't really think they deserve what happened. Not at all. They didn't deserve the great fall they had. They didn't deserve the great destruction they had. And they probably will never recover from this. Their home is destroyed. The place that they come from completely wiped out. And they're just a degenerated, mutated species now that has fallen to the corruption, the radiation that can be found in the Darklands. which if you don't adapt to, well, yeah. And unlike a lot of other species which had a chance to adapt, they didn't. That fall was quick and violent. So they're quick and they're violent. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Xulgath. They're an interesting one to talk about. And as much as they are a dangerous group that very oftentimes you cannot deal with and would be an enemy you would fight, maybe they are to be pitied because of their fall. The so-called commonly referred troglodytes were once a powerful. I hope you did enjoy. If you want to check me out ever live over on Twitch, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursdays is usually Pathfinder. Everything goes up on the YouTube side. For the YouTube side, remember to appease the algorithm, like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment. Have any else out there dealt with Xulgath/troglodytes ever in any of your games? It's an interesting thing because they can be found in small areas of the surface where they have pierced up and tried to make places for themselves. They're just not very adapted to the surface. They are an underground species. Other things, social media, Discord, Twitter/X, link down below. And yeah, I think that's everything. If you want to check out other tabletop-related stuff, if you want to catch me live, or over on YouTube a couple days later, because everything tabletop goes up on YouTube. Crimson Queen, Wednesdays, it's at 9, going to be 8 soon. Hey, I'm changing the time on this episode. Noticing the time for a bit. Check that out, the live one, and discussing games. 6 on Saturdays. All those things are great. Alright, everybody, I'm going to go hang out with the Trilogy. Maybe do another episode. Until next time we chat or hang out, I bid you all a deep and wonderful farewell.